Walk into any modern grocery store, and you are greeted by an overwhelming wall of options. Brightly colored boxes, bags, and bottles line every aisle, engineered to give you the distinct impression of infinite variety. But behind this meticulously crafted facade, that abundance is mostly a psychological trick. A typical supermarket in the developed world stocks tens of thousands of individual items, what the industry calls stock-keeping units. The sheer volume of packaging and brand names suggests a thriving, fiercely independent marketplace competing for your attention. The reality is much narrower. If you trace the ownership of those thousands of distinct labels, the sprawling corporate family trees almost always converge. A mere 10 transnational conglomerates control roughly 90% of the items currently sitting in your cart. This strategy is known as pseudo-competition. A parent company owns multiple brands within the exact same category, creating the appearance of rivalry while capturing massive blocks of retail shelf space. Take PepsiCo. After merging with Frito-Lay, it built a snack portfolio so dense it controls an estimated 88% of the domestic dip market. The dizzying array of chips and snacks is a calculated architectural barrier. It is designed specifically to maximize corporate real estate in the store and physically block independent challengers from ever reaching the consumer. Some of these corporate entities operate with absolute insulation from public oversight. Mars Incorporated generates over $50 billion annually, yet the company is entirely privately held by the Mars family. This allows them to wield immense structural power across the global confectionery sector without the immediate pressures of public shareholder reporting. As these conglomerates reach such massive scales, their internal bureaucracy slows down organic innovation. Instead of developing new products to meet shifting consumer tastes, they use their capital reserves to simply buy out successful competitors. In late 2024, Mars agreed to acquire the savory snack giant Kellanova for nearly $36 billion, absorbing empires like Pringles and Cheez-It instantly. To measure exactly how concentrated these markets have become, economists use a metric called the four-firm concentration ratio, or CR4. This chart tracks the cumulative market share held by the top 4 companies in a given industry. When that ratio crosses the 40% threshold, the market exhibits diminished competition and vulnerability to price manipulation. Applied to the American diet, the results are stark. Across grocery items, 85% of categories exceed that 40% danger zone. The constant wave of multi-billion-dollar mega mergers does not democratize the food supply. It simply reshuffles the existing incumbents, ensuring that global food brands compete almost entirely on the scale of their distribution networks rather than the quality of their actual products. The depth of this consolidation dictates the contents of entire grocery aisles. Just 3 companies control nearly 93% of all carbonated beverages, while 3 corporations dictate 73% of total breakfast cereal sales. This extreme market share creates monopsony power. Thousands of independent farmers face only 1 or 2 corporate buyers, forced to accept wholesale rates set by algorithms. Ultimately, farmers receive a mere 15 cents of every consumer dollar spent. Corporate layers capture the remaining 85. This economic squeeze is most severe in the highly consolidated meatpacking sector. Today, just 4 massive meatpacking corporations process roughly 85% of all steers and heifers in the United States, leaving independent ranchers with virtually no leverage to negotiate prices. The modern agricultural supply chain is engineered to funnel maximum capital away from the farm level and directly into the hands of corporate shareholders. That extraction applies equally to the industrial laborers working inside the processing facilities. Between 1972 and 1992, as the meatpacking industry rapidly consolidated and aggressively busted labor unions, average worker compensation relative to inflation fell by a staggering 25%. These mega facilities operate with extreme physical hazards to maintain output. During the COVID-19 pandemic, relentless line speeds and a lack of safety protocols resulted in over 86,000 meatpacking workers contracting the virus simply to satisfy corporate production quotas. Consumers are squeezed by the rocket and feather strategy. When raw inputs get expensive, conglomerates shoot retail prices up like a rocket. When commodity costs drop, retail prices stay inflated. Between 2021 and 2023, this profit expansion drove over 50% of U.S. inflation. Highly concentrated firms weaponize global supply chain shocks, using temporary crises to permanently restructure their profit margins at the direct expense of the consumer. For decades, the guiding philosophy for these food monopolies has been the ruthless reduction of overhead. By consolidating manufacturing into fewer, gigantic facilities and relying on perfectly timed global shipping, they engineered a brittle global supply chain, entirely devoid of backup options. The danger of treating a vital resource through the lens of hyper-efficiency was disastrously exposed during the 2022 United States infant formula crisis. Because just 3 firms controlled roughly 85% of the market, the closure of a single manufacturing plant in Michigan caused nationwide out-of-stock rates to surge to 43%. The consequences of this model reach far beyond empty domestic shelves. In the Global South, the immense corporate demand for cheap agricultural inputs heavily incentivizes the destruction of critical natural biomes to make room for massive soy, palm oil, and beef plantations. Despite highly publicized corporate sustainability pledges, the math at the base of the supply chain remains brutal. Cocoa farmers supplying giants like Mondelez often earn as little as $3 a day. Those extreme economic pressures directly drive the continued reliance on child labor in West Africa to meet harvest quotas. When food logistics are treated strictly through the lens of short-term efficiency and reduced overhead, the system inevitably produces localized public health failures and outsources environmental devastation. But the dominance of these legacy conglomerates is finally facing structural challenges. Squeezed by years of inflated prices, consumers are abandoning traditional brands. In response, massive retail chains, who themselves control 65% of the grocery market, are aggressively elevating the packaging and quality of their in-house store brands to capture the volume. Simultaneously, an entirely different industry is inadvertently threatening the core revenue streams of the snack food empires. The widespread adoption of GLP-1 receptor agonist medications, initially developed for diabetes, is chemically altering the caloric intake and cravings of millions of consumers. To survive a consumer base eating less junk food, the traditional conglomerates are executing rapid strategic pivots. General Mills, recognizing these shifting dietary habits, spent $8 billion to acquire Blue Buffalo, moving aggressively into the high-growth premium pet food market to offset human consumption declines. Further compounding the pressure, an influx of international trade tariffs is sharply increasing raw material costs. Food corporations are realizing they must abandon their fragile just-in-time models to hold higher safety inventories. But because of their overwhelming market dominance, they are simply passing this massive cost of resilience straight down to the consumer. The sheer scale of the Big Ten means that voluntary corporate commitments and shifting retail trends are insufficient to correct the market. Restoring genuine resilience to the global food system and protecting the farmers, workers, and consumers at its mercy requires mandatory legislative intervention and aggressive antitrust enforcement to permanently dismantle the monopolies.